My name's Todd Miranda, and in this video I'm going to demonstrate how to play a sound in response to an event in WPF using Sound Player Action. So let's begin in Microsoft Visual Studio 2008. We'll choose File, New Project, and we're going to create a WPF application project. We'll name it whatever we'd like. Choose OK. Now in WPF there's a number of ways that we can play sound in our WPF application. We can use what's called the Sound Player. We can use what's called Sound Player Action. We could use Media Player, or we could use Media Element. And each one of these things have their pluses and minuses. They all have things that are good about using them and bad about using them. Some give us more control, some give us less control, and some allow us to use markup to use those elements. Some don't allow us to use markup, and we have to write the code in code behind. So let's take a look at, ultimately we're going to take a look at Sound Player Action, which is a markup way of responding to some type of an event in WPF and playing a sound in response to that event. But let's begin by just taking a quick look at the Sound Player object that we can use. Now Sound Player is the same Sound Player that's been around for a long time in .NET. We've been able to use Sound Player to play sound in all types of client applications, WinForm style applications. So let's just begin and let's build a user interface that we'll be able to utilize. So we'll just choose a button because we want to respond to an event, and a typical event would be a click event of a button that we might want to respond to. So in order to build our button, let's just start with a border. And let's go with, let's just do a name equals, and actually let's do x:name equals border button. And then let's do a corner radius on this button. And let's say corner radius of maybe 8. Alright, then we'll do a margin, because we're just going to position it using margin. So let's go 10, 15, 0, 0. And then let's go ahead and give this a height. So we'll say height of 40. And maybe we'll go ahead and give it a width. And we'll say width of, let's say 150. Alright, so we'll do our vertical alignment, and that's going to be vertical line to the top. We'll do horizontal alignment, and that'll give us a horizontal of left, and that'll give us our border. Let's close it that way so we can use element syntax to do some things. Alright, so there's our border. We can see that on our page. Let's just add a little bit of background to this, and we'll go ahead and do a little bit of a gradient background. Border.background. So we'll come in here. We'll decrease our area up here for our design view so we can just see a little bit more of our XAML. Alright, let's use a linear gradient brush. So we'll do linear gradient brush. We'll say that the start point is 0, 0. The end point is 0, 1. And then we'll come into our linear gradient brush and we'll create our first gradient. Stop. We'll do a color of, let's say we'll use dark blue with an offset of something small. Let's do 0.1. And then we'll grab that and paste it twice. Except this middle color will just be blue. And this should be maybe about halfway through. We'll do 0.4, that should work. And this should be all the way through, so we'll do 1. That'll work. That'll work. Okay, so that gives us a little bit of a gradient. So now let's add some text. And we're going to add the text as a text block that is a child of our border. So let's just do a text block. We'll say text equals make noise. Now it's a good idea typically to name all of your XAML elements. It's just kind of good practice to get into. It also helps when you're going to reference those elements from code behind. We're not going to be referencing our text block, so we're kind of take a cheat a little bit, and we're going to skip naming our element. But just want to mention it's really a good practice to get into, to name all your elements. Let's set the foreground of this to white so that it's a little bit easier to see. There we are. And we're just going to do the horizontal alignment equals center. We're going to do vertical alignment equals center. And that should be good. I'll tell you what, let's set the font size to maybe 20. Yep, that'll fit. That works good. So here's our button. Alright. Now, we had mentioned before that one of the ways that we can play sound is with the sound player. And the way that we would do that, we can't use sound player in markup. Sound player is just an object that we have to instantiate in code behind. So if we wanted to respond to, say, a click event for our border, it would look something like this. We would do left mouse button down, and we'll choose the default new event handler, which gives us our event handler name. So we'll save that. We'll go to our code behind. And we don't need a lot of these, so we'll take out these and then do using system.media, because we want to use the sound player, which comes out of the system.media. Let's just create inside of our class, our window 1 class, let's just create an instance of the sound player class. So we'll do sound player equals new sound player, new sound player, and we pass to the constructor, we're going to pass the actual sound that we want to play. So now's a good time to add a sound to our project. So I'm going to go up here to project, up in our menu. I'm going to do add existing item, and we'll just go out here to our code window, choose audio files, and we'll just grab this Windows ding.wave file. So we'll instantiate our sound player with Windows ding.wave, and we're going to go into the properties of this and just tell it to always copy. That way we make sure that it's there. We don't have to have a funny URL here. We'll just use a relative URL. So now what you could do to help out a little bit is we can come in here to the constructor for our window, and we'll reference player, and we'll say load async. And what that's going to do is it's just going to go ahead and load the audio file when the window's created. Now, obviously, down here in our mouse left button down, we say player.play. Now, notice a couple of things that we have available to us. The play, if you look at the IntelliSense, says plays the WAV file using a new thread. So this plays the file asynchronously. There is also a play synchronous, a play sync, which allows us to play the file synchronously, and there's a play looping. So play looping allows us to play the file over and over and over again instead of just once. So there's a number of options just with the play command for our sound. So while Sound Player has some limitations, obviously Sound Player will only play WAV files. It's been around for a long time, so it only plays WAV files. You can't use this in markup. So this is something that you would use in the code behind, and it really doesn't have any support for playing more than one sound simultaneously. So you can only play one sound at a time, and you can't change the volume of sound. So it has some limitations, but beyond that, it's got a lot of flexibility. You can load your file asynchronously ahead of time. You can play the file asynchronously. You can play the file synchronously. You can loop the file. So let's save this and let's build our project. See if we've missed anything. Alright, I've got a build failed, so I've missed something. Took out one too many namespaces. You can see here that it could not find the class window. So I took out, using system.media, .window, so Windows, so we need that. Okay, so that should solve that problem. Let's build again. Build succeeded. Let's run the application. Alright, there's our application. If we click on our button, there we hear the noise, and that's using the sound player. So obviously one of the problems with that is, in order to play the sound in response to an event, we have to wire up that event in our XAML, and then we have to come to our code behind and we have to code for that. Well, let's take a look at a nice little object, or a nice little element called Sound Player Action. So I'm going to comment out all of my player capability here, so we're not going to use that anymore. We're going to go back to our XAML file, and we're going to add a little bit of something to our button, to our border, which makes up our button. So let's come down here, and actually we could do this right after the border.background. We're going to come in here, we're going to do border.triggers. Alright, so we're going to add trigger. We're going to add an event trigger, and the routed event that we're going to respond to is this same mouse left button down event. Now I'm going to go ahead and remove the mouse left button down event handler because we're not going to use it. So it's gone. And that way we make sure that we're not getting any interference from any code that we had written earlier. Now, since we're inside our triggers collection and we're doing an event trigger, we need to tell the event trigger what type of mouse left button down this is. And this is a border.mouse left button down. So it's not just any mouse left button down, since this is a routed event, so it could come from anywhere. So we need to tell it where exactly we're talking about. So within the event trigger, we want to create an event trigger.actions block. And the action that we want to use is a sound player action, source being Windows ding.wave. So, fairly simple. We were able to utilize an element, a WPF XAML element called Sound Player Action, put that inside of our event trigger, which is our mouse left button down, and we will get the same type of behavior. So let's go ahead and run this. Now when we click our button, we get our noise, our little ding, and we didn't have to use code behind, we didn't have to use our sound player, we could use a sound player action. So a couple of notes just to mention about sound player action. Obviously there's not a lot of options here. So whereas sound player was restricted with some of the restrictions we mentioned, volume control, multiple sounds playing at the same time, only supports wave audio, the sound player action is really a wrapper for the sound player, and it's just a XAML wrapper for the sound player. So it has not only the same limitations that sound player itself has, but it also has more restrictions, because really you don't have a lot of other options other than just playing the sound. So you don't really have a lot of the looping capability, you don't have a lot of the synchronous, even though I don't know what situation you'd want to play a sound synchronously in, because if you play the sound synchronously, your application's effectively going to lock up or freeze until the sound gets finished playing. But you don't have the capability to choose to play your sound synchronously. You can't change the volume. You really can't preload the audio file. So what's happening is, if you have a large audio file in your sound player action, you're going to see a little bit of a delay when the event occurs, because the sound player is having to load the WAV file before playing it. So you can't preload that WAV file like we did with the sound player. So even though there's some restrictions, if you have a small file and you just simply want to provide some type of audible feedback for events in your application, and you don't want to have to write C# or VB.NET code, that's not a problem, because you can do it using an XAML element, Sound Player Action, as part of your trigger of one of your elements, and you get the same type of functionality, some type of audible feedback, and you've done it all right here within your markup.